25 hours from now, 26 actually, the most important presidential debate in American history starts right here on NewsNation. Live look at Constitutional Hall, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where Donald Trump and Kamala Harris will square off for a debate unlike any other. There is no rule book for this. With that, we welcome you to the Ferris Network on television. First tonight, momentum. Going into the debate, Donald Trump has momentum, and Kamala Harris wants it, needs it back. A New York Times poll of likely voters in the November election shows she's now trailing Trump by 1 percentage point. And that is very bad news for Kamala Harris. Swing state, the polls are tightening even more. The poll shows the idea of Kamala Harris seems to be better than the actual thing, than the real Kamala Harris. 50 days ago, we saw the start of a torrid media love affair. Kamala the savior arrived. Trumpets sounded, balloons fell. Journalists forgot any and all reasonable standards and wrote stories like, we quote, Harris turns to her favorite foods in an effort to show a more private side and connect with voters. That is not the Daily Beast or the Huffington Post. That is the Associated Press writing that story. It shows you the kind of advertising, free advertising, Kamala Harris has gotten. In 50 days, the woman who was once openly mocked as vice president, there were stories about her being replaced. Now she is the best parts of Gandhi and Margaret Thatcher. And yet, in the polls, she is only tied. Nothing kills a bad product faster than good advertising. And no politician in history has received more free advertising than Kamala Harris. Even Bernie Sanders says she's doing whatever it takes to win come November.
Do you think that she is abandoning her progressive ideals?
No, I don't think she's abandoning her ideals. I think she's trying to be pragmatic and doing what she thinks is right in order to win the election.
Meanwhile, there's a ton of good news for Trump in the New York Times poll. For example, 51% of voters said Trump represents major change in Washington. Only 25% say that about Harris. And 63% of voters say they want major change. The New York Times write-up on the poll says Harris' support has stalled after a euphoric August. Politico described the poll numbers as sobering. In short, this is Donald Trump's election to lose. The bad news for Republicans, he is working really hard at doing just that. From social media this weekend, when I win, those people that cheated will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences, so that the depravity of justice does not happen again. That does nothing to convince swing voters. Nothing. All it does is give Democrats an excuse to call him a dictator or a wannabe dictator. Just one example, of course. There are many of Trump being Trump and Trump being Trump's own worst enemy. We begin tonight with Bill O'Reilly, host of the No Spin News, author of the new book, Confronting the Presidents, No Spin Assessments from Washington to Biden. I believe the book is out. Is it not, sir?
At midnight. But some people have
Tomorrow.
it already, like you, Leland.
Yes, I do. We've got a whole special.
And
we have a whole special. We're going to get to it. And for those who can want to order on Amazon, it'll still be there tomorrow. Is Trump Trump's own worst enemy?
yeah, I think so. He should be ahead by 5 to 10 points because Kamala Harris doesn't really have any problem-solving ability and dodges all meaningful questions. So something happened today, and I want to break this on Leland Vittert's program, On Balance. The House Republicans put out a report that said that President Biden ignored his military advisors and was the architect of the disastrous withdrawal in Afghanistan. Okay? And the report is pretty thorough and backed up. So almost immediately, the Harris campaign puts on its website that, oh no, that's wrong. Trump caused the disastrous withdrawal. Now, malarkey doesn't even come close to covering this, but that's what you're going to hear tomorrow night. Afghanistan, Trump's bad policies did it. Inflation, Trump lighted the fuse. Open border, Trump is against comprehensive immigration reform. On and on and on. And the kicker is that Kamala Harris is simply not going to answer any specific questions. I don't even know if the ABC moderators will push back on the absurdity that all of the Biden failed policies were Trump's fault. Because if they do, David Muir and Lindsey Davis, then they would be perceived as helping Trump. Oh, you can't have that.
No, that's the mortal sin.
That's the sin. So when Harris spouts everything we did that went badly was Trump's fault, and it's just going to hang there. Now, do you have a question here? Because I can go on a little bit more, but I think
I've got lots of questions. We got Bill Cassidy, Senator of Louisiana, coming up on the Afghanistan report. And you're right. In terms of Kamala Harris's policy proposals, especially, they're aspirational. They're pretty thin on her website. It's
nothing.
Everybody's going to have a fluffy puppy, and puppies are good. So therefore, we should all have puppies, and the government will pay for it.
Let me give you one, Leland.
Okay.
Wait. Let me give you one you can use, just for you. If anybody else on NewsNation steals it, I'll come after them. So her whole campaign now, and the newest campaign ad is that she's going to take America in a new direction. Right? You've seen the ad. It's going in a new direction. What was wrong with the Biden-Harris old direction? Why do you have to go in a new direction?
Or how is the new direction different than the old direction? It'd be a great question.
You're never going to get the new direction.
No.
Never going to get
No, we got Steyerwalt and Salmon coming up on the debate. Hold on. Let me get you to something. Okay? This is Nikki Haley, who has endorsed Donald Trump this morning, talking about Donald Trump talking about women. Take a listen.
Donald Trump and J.D. Vance need to change the way they speak about women. You don't need to call Kamala dumb. When you call even a Democrat woman dumb, Republican women get their backs up too. The bottom line is we win on policies.
I had a guy on the radio today describe Donald Trump as having the message discipline of a hangry 2-year-old. Which I don't have kids, but that doesn't sound like there's an awful lot of discipline involved.
What do you want me to say, Leland? I mean, this is obvious. And Trump makes mistakes when he gets into personal stuff. He's heard it a million times. It's a matter of discipline. I don't think you're going to see that tomorrow night. From what his advisors are saying, they're following my course. And believe me, I didn't hand it to him. I just go on NewsNation and other outlets and say, look, Donald Trump wants to be president. All he's got to do is muse out there. This is what I did with Chris Cuomo last Wednesday. Just muse like, I'm an American. I'm confused. Why would you let 10 million undocumented foreign nationals into the country? Are you going to ask that to the vice president, David and Lindsey? All you got to do is muse. How can the essentials of life rise 20%? When I left office, it was 1.4% inflation. If he just muses, he wins because she can't answer any of it. She'll just say, it's Trump's fault. And the American people, a lot of them are disassociated with reality because of this. They live here now. They don't live in their own home. This is where they live. But most people aren't dumb. And if she starts that tomorrow night, and she may, and I want to make a Warren Harding reference, Leland, do we have time to make a Warren Harding?
We don't have any video of Warren Harding available, but sure.
Okay, but that's all right. Warren Harding became president in 1920. The Kamala Harris campaign is modeled on his campaign. Warren Harding never wrote a speech, just read the words put in front of him, didn't campaign, sat on the porch of his Marion, Ohio home. And if you wanted to see Warren, you could go up and ask him a question, and he may or may not answer it. Warren Harding won in a landslide because people were fed up with 8 years of Woodrow Wilson. And they despised Woodrow at the end of his term, so they elected Warren. Warren was one of the worst presidents, as you'll see in Confronting the Presidents. Warren's mistress gave birth during the presidential campaign, Leland. His mistress. All right?
You know what's interesting, though? Harding didn't make... report it. Well, okay, perfect. You brought me to my next point. See, we need to plan this better. Okay, this is from CNN. A newly uncovered ACLU questionnaire from 2019 shows Harris supported the following: taxpayer-funded gender transition surgeries for detained immigrants, decriminalizing drug possession, drastic cuts to ICE, along with ending immigrant detention. Now, to be fair, this was first reported by the K-File of CNN, who is going back and doing this reporting. And this is why I think it's interesting. The latest New York Times Siena College poll found 28% of likely voters feel they need to know more about Harris. Of that group, 2/3 said they needed to know more about her plans and policies specifically. And this is where I come back to our lead memo, which is that the more people learn about Kamala Harris, the less they seem to like her. And be fair, CNN now, among others, are starting to, they're done with the sugar high, and they're starting to dig deeper on Kamala Harris.
That's true. CNN has now undergone a course correction. And the proof is they booked me for Confronting the Presidents this week. I'm going to be on CNN. Yeah. That never would have happened.
But you know what?
Ever.
It will never be as good. The interview on CNN will not be as good as yours and my special Confronting the Presidents. We have got a clip. Take a look.
Teddy rose the morale of America to the highest level. Because remember, coming off McKinley, coming off Grover Cleveland, Benjamin Harris, and all these guys are, all right, yeah, they're there. Then Teddy comes a superstar. Okay, he's the Taylor Swift of masculine men. Wherever he went, the crowds loved him. The morale.
The Taylor Swift of masculine men.
Right. Highest energy president by far, Teddy Roosevelt.
You think Trump's going to be angry that he didn't make your top 5 list?
I don't have a list. We, in the special, you and NewsNation selected, and I'm glad you did. It's an excellent special, by the way. And people should try to watch it Sunday evening. You guys selected what you thought were the top 5 and bottom 5, and you were close on a lot of them. But what I did was I told you the truth about all 45 men. And some of the truth is harrowing. And Americans need to know it because we are now involved in a presidential race less than 2 months from today, where we could elect somebody who doesn't have discipline over what he says, but did govern for 4 years fairly effectively, if you look at the facts, and someone who has demonstrated absolutely no capacity to solve any problem. I don't even believe the vice president understands the problems. And I'll go back to this. If I'm sitting there interviewing Kamala Harris, what do you think would happen, Leland?
High ratings. How about that?
But, and I don't mean to be a braggart, she couldn't get through the interview because I would ask her very specific questions about a lot of things, and she doesn't know. And to me, in this volatile time on this earth, that is frightening. Trump has a record.
Fair enough. Confronting the Presidents is out, as you heard, tomorrow. You can pre-order it. I would suggest everyone does. It's a phenomenal read, especially ahead of the election. Bill, thank you. Bill and I, Bill O'Reilly's Confronting the Presidents, America's Best and Worst, Sunday, 9 p.m. Eastern. A little bit more throughout the week on the special. Hamas just told the Biden administration to pound sand. How America can retake the world stage after the failed withdrawal from Afghanistan. And crybabies. Both Harris and Trump keep complaining about the debate rules and the moderators and format. Is this really who we want running the free world? Here heard Bill O'Reilly talking about this. House Republicans just released a devastating report showing how the Biden administration allegedly led the disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal. The 250-page document goes on to say President Biden completely ignored his top military personnel and withdrew from Afghanistan for his own personal political gain, killing 13 American service members. The White House was asked about it today.
Was anyone ever held accountable by the president directly for what happened with the withdrawal in Afghanistan? And if not, remind the audience why not.
We have all held ourselves accountable for the progress of the withdrawal across the administration.
Senator Bill Cassidy is with us, Republican from Louisiana. Good to see you, sir. The quote from John Kirby that we just heard, was anyone held accountable by the president directly for what happened with the withdrawal in Afghanistan? His answer, we have all held ourselves accountable. Is that enough?
It is not enough. That's kind of like socialism. Everybody owns it, so nobody owns it. The reality is that if you have a disaster like that disaster, there needs to be somebody who theoretically was in charge. And if it's as screwed up as it was, that somebody's head should roll. And the idea that we all held ourselves accountable was kind of a kumbaya moment. I'm not buying it.
All right, so 13 Americans killed, obviously, during the Afghanistan withdrawal by the suicide bomber at Abbey Gate. We spoke to one of their fathers, one of their mothers-in-law, as well. Heartbreaking interviews. Who do you think should be fired and held responsible in one way or another for their deaths?
I think that the House is trying to piece this together. I thought the report showing that the ambassador had taken a vacation the month before the withdrawal was telling. We did not have a plan for withdrawal. We ended up leaving billions of dollars of equipment and of money, and yet there was no thinking, how do we get it out of here? So maybe he was not told they were leaving. Although the Biden administration keeps on saying, wait a second, hands are tied because it was set in stone. So a lot of this just doesn't add up. Ultimately, by the way, remember the sign on Harry Truman's desk, the buck stops here? The buck should have stopped with Joe Biden. And if Vice President Harris was the last person in the room after he made the decision, maybe she gets 50 cents of the dollar.
It's interesting you bring up Harris's name because you're right. She has said that I was the last person in the room when the decision was made. A number of times Harris's report was named in the Afghanistan withdrawal reports in 2022 twice. In this new report, 251 times. Is it just a coincidence that now that she's on the top of the ticket, her name has suddenly appeared so many more times with such greater interest in her role?
I cannot speak to the committee hearings. I was not part of it, and I won't pretend. But obviously, if she's saying that she was the last person in the room, that may invite more scrutiny.
Okay, fair enough. I think about the New York Post cover, which, as usual, really drives home the point. But part of this report, during his decades-long tenure as Delaware U.S. Senator, 8 years as Vice President, 4 years as President, Mr. Biden has demonstrated distrust of America's military experts and advisors. And there was the point made that President Biden wanted American troops out of Afghanistan regardless of the high water and the potential costs. At some point, isn't the fact that we got out, albeit messy, make America safer? Our men and women in uniform are not in harm's way anymore. We're not spending billions of dollars a year on Afghanistan when the Taliban was effectively running it anyway. I get how he did it was a disaster. Was the decision itself wrong?
I'm going to dispute a little bit of what you said. Okay. We had 3,000 troops there with our allies shouldering a lot of the responsibility and a lot of the expense. The Afghan army was doing the armed conflict against the Taliban. We had the Taliban at bay. In the meantime, the CIA had listening stations in which they could monitor all the countries around. Think of the countries that are there: Pakistan, Iran, China, not a bad place to be if you want to kind of
fair enough
eavesdrop on what's happening. So I think
I'll add one more for you, right? You had Bagram Air Force Base, which was by far the closest U.S. warplanes could have ever gotten to the western part of China, where Western's nuclear missiles are and their ICBMs are. So huge strategic value there. Since the withdrawal from Afghanistan, America's foreign policy, America's standing in the world has deteriorated significantly. President Biden has staked an awful lot on trying to now get a ceasefire in Gaza, perhaps something along the lines of cementing his legacy. Reporting from the Washington Post today that seems unlikely at best right now because of Hamas. John Kirby on that. Take a listen.
We still believe that even for the new amendments that Hamas has made, that it's still worth an effort to try to see if we can't get back into a ceasefire negotiation, but we're not there right now.
As terrible as the deaths of 13 American service members are that didn't need to die at Abbey Gate, as terrible as the hit to American prestige from the withdrawal from Afghanistan is and continues to be on the after effects, I get the feeling not only has nobody been held responsible, but nobody has learned what the Biden foreign policy does to America's standing around the world.
You can argue that Russia felt emboldened to invade Ukraine because of what happened in Afghanistan. And I'll say once more, we had 3,000 troops there. Our allies were shouldering a lot of the burden. The Afghan army was doing the active fighting. So it's not like we had to pull out or else we're going to have a lot of GI die. No, it had become much more of a calmer place. So when you retreat from that, Putin's going to decide, maybe I can just keep on pushing and the door's going to always be open. At some point, you send a message by your actions. It appears this administration sent some messages.
Well, it seems as though it was a political decision. At least that's what we've read. And the report says, it's telling now that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden aren't running on it as a political success. So I guess that speaks volumes. Senator, it's good to see you. We appreciate it. Come visit us in studio when you're back in D.C., sir.
Will do. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. All right, live pictures of Philadelphia. The debate rules significantly favor one candidate. We'll tell you which one next. Live pictures of Philadelphia, the first Harris-Trump debate, now just a little over 24 hours away. Full coverage here tomorrow. For two people who want to be leaders of the free world, Trump and Harris have an impressive list of grievances about a 90-minute debate. Politico reports Team Harris is still caught up on the muted microphones thing. Harris team worried she'll be handcuffed by the debate rules. Even some Democrats dismiss her griping as gamemanship. But the mic rules are changing her strategy, evidently. For his part, Trump is lowering expectations by suggesting his performance will be criticized, win or lose.
Oh, they're waiting for the debate. You know, if I destroy her in the debate, they'll say, Trump suffered a humiliating defeat tonight, no matter what.
With us now, Chris Steyerwalt and Bill Salmon. Both ran debates for a little more than a decade at Fox News, worked together on more than a dozen debates dating back to 2011 and the Republican debate here on NewsNation. Gentlemen, good to see both of you. Thank you. Mr. Salmon, start with you. How does Kamala Harris being a woman change the dynamic?
I think it's an extra challenge, whether you want to admit it or not. There are people who may or may not be ready for a woman to be president of the United States. You would think we would be beyond that, but I think there are some Americans that still harbor some doubts. Hillary saw that as well. So that just makes her, her order is a little taller, if you will. I think she has more to gain in this debate and more to lose in this debate than Trump. To the extent that she hasn't been defined, and she's been defined somewhat, but there's still some ways to go. People could come away with a very good or very bad impression of her. By contrast, Trump is so defined that I find it hard to believe that the needle moves one way or the other very much based on what happens tomorrow night. After everything we've seen out of Trump over the last 9 years, We've all become numb to the controversial things that he says. The guy's been impeached. He's been convicted. He's been January 6th. It's hard to imagine that.
This is Steyerwalt's line, right? That he has a low ceiling, high floor.
It's a narrow bandwidth.
Chris, interestingly enough, 30% of Americans now in the New York Times poll say they want to know more about Kamala Harris. This caught our eye out of that same New York Times poll. Trump, too conservative, 32%, not conservative enough, 11%, not too far either way, 50%. Harris, too liberal, 44%, not liberal enough, 9%, not too far either way, 42%. Does that say that Trump has the center more defined or more of his lane?
Well, I think what that means is that reason is the servant of the passions. It means that voters make up their minds who they like, who they prefer, and then they backfill in the rationalization after that. They say, I think he's about right.
The debate doesn't change that.
Well, here's what this debate is. There's about 6% of the electorate that is undecided, and then at the periphery there's another 10 points, let's say, of potentially persuadable voters who might really switch. But there's a very small number of people who are genuinely undecided between these two starkly different in biography, in policy, in nature, these two very different people. There's not that many people who genuinely are undecided between the two of them. So when you think about this debate, you can watch it with the sound off to a certain degree. How do they look? How do they feel? What's the vibe?
We have a whole segment on that.
I know.
Coming up next.
That's how you get down. I know. So Kamala Harris basically has 3 tests that she has to pass. She's got to seem presidential. She has to seem plausible. She did that at the debate. Or at the convention. She did that. She has, number 2, tell a story about this massive migration on policy that she's undertaken. It's not about having specific answers on things. She has to tell a story to people that says, okay, I see how it's possible that a person thought this way in 2019 and thinks this way in 2024. She has to have a good story to tell. And the third thing is she has to annoy Donald Trump without annoying the rest of the world. Hillary Clinton wrote a piece in the New York Times, the worst advice I can possibly imagine for Kamala Harris. Attack him directly. Go right in his face. Push him on specifics. No. That will annoy the audience the way that Hillary Clinton annoyed the audience. She should be aloof. She should float above him and make him mad that way.
Bill, how does what we just heard play into, if you agree with it, the role of the moderators in this and how much they want to be the story on Wednesday morning?
Well, you never want to be the story if you're a good journalist.
If
big if. But I think the moderators should ask some pretty obvious questions, and if they don't, I think the candidates should ask them of each other. For example, on the question of her migration on policy, I think you stipulate to her, Madam Vice President, you said in a previous interview that your values haven't changed. Stipulate it. Okay, we're going to take you at your word. Why have your policies changed? And that way it gives her less wiggle room to wiggle out of that. Similarly, someone needs to ask Donald Trump, you know, you've been saying for years that you won the election in 2020, and then the other day you said you lost by a whisker. Which is it? So there's some central questions that have to be asked, and you have to be ready if you're a candidate to not just be reactive and field all of these questions, but have a few things in your back pocket that you would like to put on the table in the form of questions to the candidate, or, you know, join me in making a pledge tonight that we will seal the border, or whatever it is, or a zinger. You know, think Ronald Reagan or Lloyd Benson. Those are hard to pull off, and if you look too rehearsed.
Think Kamala Harris, right? Kamala Harris is the one who said that little girl is me.
Yeah.
About the busing.
Yeah.
Is that enough, Chris?
I think for the first test of being plausibly presidential, you can't study for that test. You either are or you aren't. And we saw with Barack Obama in 2008, he walked down on the stage with Hillary Clinton, and people said, "Oh, I buy it. Seems like this guy could be president."
Talking about the primary.
Yeah. How do you know? How do you know until you go? So that's the big moment. These two people have never met each other. They have never been on the same stage. Donald Trump is this big, hulking guy who has been playing the part of the president for almost a decade. He's fixed in the American mind as the president, whether they love him or whether they hate him. He occupies that office in many people's minds. When she walks out on that stage, that blink test of voters look at that and say, yeah, or they say, nah. And if they say, ask Michael Dukakis, we can go through a list of people who came to that moment and failed that first test, and either she's got it or she doesn't. I think she probably has it. I think she's probably been getting ready for this, but you can't study for that part.
There we go. All right, gentlemen, we'll all be watching together tomorrow. We'll see you back here later in the week to recap. Thank you both. Appreciate it. Good to see you. Both Trump and Harris have certain tells. This is what Mr. Steyerwalt just alluded to, just like poker players. How you can tell what both Trump and Harris are saying with the TV on mute. Debate camp since Thursday practicing. Trump says he's not practicing, but having policy meetings. And think about the debate, maybe in a different way than rather than politics. Think about it like a poker game, with the White House as the pot. Winner of the debate wins the White House. Like all poker players, each of them has tells. Here's Mel Gibson in the movie Maverick explaining.
That'll be 12,000.
Too rich for my blood. I'm out.
You put me out of the game.
Yes, I did.
I didn't do any of my tails. I didn't play with my ring. I didn't twirl my hair. I didn't even flick my teeth.
You held your breath.
Trump has tells. So does Kamala Harris. With us now, Janine Driver, body language expert, founder of the Body Language Institute. Welcome, welcome.
Nice.
Sometime we'll go to Vegas and play cards together. But until then, we will analyze Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. Here's Donald Trump, and you picked this out with him with his lips. Take a look.
Yeah.
Never heard so much foolishness. This is the guy who wants to get out of NATO. You're going to stay in NATO? He's going to pull out of NATO.
Can you clarify exactly what it means about you feeling you have every right to go after your political opponents?
Well, I said my retribution is going to be success.
You're a whiner. When you lost the first time, you continued, you appealed and appealed to courts all across the country.
Is that nervousness? What is that?
This is linked to suppression of how you're feeling. So they call it the duck lips, right? But you know who used to do this too? Kobe Bryant would do this going down a basketball court. When a play wouldn't go right, you'd see Kobe Bryant do that. What does it mean? It means something's not going well. If you're in a business meeting, Leland, think about, so someone goes like this, they're not liking your idea. It's thinking of a different way to go. It's disagreement.
And is it because he wants to show that to the audience, or he wants to...
It's suppressing. I mean, it could be something else. He could come out and say something nasty, so it's suppressing his emotions in that moment. It could be anger, it could be contempt, it could be disgust. Those are the troublemakers right there.
Okay, and Kamala Harris at times has been quite good, especially with some practice lines during the debates. Here she is while debating Mike Pence.
It wasn't like he didn't have a chance. He didn't do it, and then he doubled down. Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking. I'm speaking.
The smile there, it's...
All right. A study was done in 2012, and here's the deal. Even if it's a fake smile, it'll decrease stress and anxiety. It relaxes your heart rate. And here, I pulled some numbers for you, Leland. Ready? 2020, Biden did this against the debate against Paul Ryan. 2016, Hillary Clinton did it against Trump. 2012, Obama did it against Mitt Romney. But they stole it from a Republican, Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan did it in 1984 against Walter Mondale. Remember that?
Yeah.
That's old school. I'm dating myself. You're younger than me.
I'll put it this way. That did not work out well for Mondale.
But now the Democrats have stole the perma-smile from the Republican, Ronald Reagan. And here's the deal. It will decrease stress and anxiety, and we have mirror neurons. So even if it's a fake smile, people watching are like, oh, they're confident. She's in control. She has power, even if it might not be authentic.
Okay, I'm hearing you now, and I'm going to think about it with a big smile. All right, so speaking of smiles, we have a tight-lipped smile from Donald Trump.
I got my handicap, which when I was vice president, down to a 6. But by the way, I told you before, I'm happy to play golf if you carry your own bag. Think you can do it? You're such a whiner. The idea, if you lose again, you accepting anything, you can't stand the loss. Something snapped in you when you lost the last time. What he's telling you is simply not true. The fact is that there was no effort on his part.
Did somebody tell him to smile more? Is that...
this is my favorite
way to
clip.
figure out if it's real or not?
Well, this is my favorite clip. His lips disappearing. I like to say, when we don't like what we see or hear, our lips disappear. Again, it's suppressing. But here's something unique you might not have caught, is he dips his shoulder to his right. This is the scales of justice. People who tip and lean at a diagonal, these are our evaluators. And President Trump is an evaluator, weighing pros and cons, wants the system. What is the system? However, is judgmental and can prejudge. So we see this dipping of the scales. Pay attention to that when people are always at that diagonal. And I live in that space. So does Donald Trump. With decision-making, there's 6 areas of decision-making. Trump lives in that area of evaluating. So not only is he suppressing his emotions, he's still evaluating in that moment. He has not checked out. He's ready to go when it's his turn to talk.
All right. Real quick last, we're going to go with Kamala Harris with Tulsi Gabbard. This was perhaps didn't work out as well for Kamala Harris. Take a listen.
What Senator Harris is doing is unfortunately continuing to traffic in lies and smears and innuendos because she cannot challenge the substance of the argument that I'm making, the leadership and the change that I'm seeking to bring in our foreign policy, which only makes me guess that she will, as president, continue the status quo.
How much of what her reactions are practiced?
Listen, I know as a fact politicians are practicing, especially the smile. I know because I work with people, and I've actually helped a couple of politicians on the QT. Here's the deal. We are seeing that smirk here. Smirk is connected to either an increase in your cognitive overload, where there's like a disconnect with what you're hearing and what you're thinking. So there's that cognitive dissonance that's happening inside our brain. Or it's contempt, which is moral superiority. And contempt is, I'm better than you. I'm better than your ideas. Wait till I'm up at bat. I'll show you. So that moral of superiority we see with that smirk
Beware
that's
happening.
Beware of the smirk. Beware of the smirk. But we find men who smirk very attractive. Harry Connick Jr. smirks all the time. He told me once.
You're going to teach me next time you're
He told me he did it all the time.
Smirk.
Yes.
That's the next
smirk.
thing.
Nice to see you again, Leland.
Elton John says Donald Trump is brilliant. How long can he survive as a celebrity who doesn't hate Trump? Never thought we'd be talking about this guy in 2024. Republicans put Dick Cheney out to pasture long ago. Democrats hated him for 20-plus years. They accused him of being Trump-like, a dictator, a war criminal. But now that he has endorsed Kamala Harris, he is a brave fighter for democracy.
Dick Cheney was Vice President of the United States for 8 years. He was a senior member of the House. He was Chief of Staff to Gerald Ford. He worked tirelessly to advance Republican policies for a long time. You don't think his endorsement of a Democrat with that kind of pedigree is going to make a difference with swing voters?
I really don't.
All right, Vice President, Political Strategy, Crooked Media, Shaniqua McClendon is here. Democratic political strategist Denny Salas. Great to have both of you. Welcome back to D.C. from New York. All right, Shaniqua, is that all it takes to rehabilitate Dick Cheney?
Okay. No one's ever thought Dick Cheney was stupid. He knows Donald Trump is a threat. That doesn't mean we like him now. We just know he has a brain.
All right. I mean, Bernie Sanders went a little bit farther than that. Take a listen.
But I cannot support somebody who's a pathological liar, somebody who fomented a insurrection to overthrow the election return. So I applaud the Cheneys for their courage in defending democracy. Obviously, on all the issues, we have very different points of view.
Denny, I'm on to something here, right? Okay, come on. Come on. All of a sudden now, Dick Cheney is this sort of statesman figure who needs to be listened to rather than made fun of for shooting his hunting partner.
I mean, look, I think Democrats viewed him as a Trump before Trump. He was a guy that obviously shot his friend in the face when he was out hunting.
It was in the shoulder, but okay.
Yeah, but, I think some pelts still landed in the face area. But, that being said, I think that at the end of the day, he's a gentleman that still loves America. And he's putting country above party. And that is going to resonate to a lot of the disenchanted
But it doesn't resonate, right? Dick Cheney, Liz Cheney, Jimmy McCain, Olivia Troy, John Giles, Jeff Duncan, Stephanie Grisham, 200 former Republican senators, all these people, there's now an ad out of people, Mike Pence included, saying that Donald Trump should be president. It's not working. It It's not working.
It's going to be at the margins. We all know that this is already a close election.
You really think there's people? You guys really think there's people out there that were going to vote for Donald Trump and they have heard from Dick Cheney and now they're like, oh no.
That's not what we're saying. That's not at least not what I'm saying. What I am saying is I think there's some people who did not want to vote for Donald Trump, had no intention on voting for Donald Trump, but now they have a bit of permission to vote for Kamala Harris. And, not voting for Trump is one thing, but actually giving Kamala Harris the vote is a whole other thing that will help her win.
Okay. All right.
Well, I would add one thing, too. Please. Remember, even after Nikki Haley dropped out, you still had a sizable between 15 to 20%.
To be fair, she's now endorsed.
She has endorsed, but she's not on the campaign.
But I don't think her voters have. Not all of them.
And she's
I guess we'll see. I thought this was fascinating, just in terms of celebrity and endorsements. Elton John. How did it feel when he took the lyrics to Rocket Man and used it to nickname Kim Jong-un? I laughed. I thought it was brilliant. I thought, good on you, Donald. I'm the Rocket Man. Yeah, Donald's always been a fan of mine. He's always been in my concerts many times. I've been friendly towards him. Thank him for his support. When he did that, I just thought it was hilarious. Is Elton John finally the one celebrity who is allowed to like Donald Trump and not be canceled?
Look, I think Donald Trump is funny. I don't think anyone's going to say that he's not a humorous person.
Agreed.
He is very funny. And think about it, this is a guy that also had relationships with all these celebrities way before he started running for president and started saying some of the controversial things that
back when he was a Democrat.
Exactly.
Back when he was a Democrat. Okay, look, Elton John, you have to think that there are certain there's a world in which saying something nice about Donald Trump gets you cut off from happy celebrity elite world, right?
I mean, I can think about Ivana Trump. I can't really think of someone who has been purely cut off other than her and her husband from kind of elite social life in New York. I guess we're being a little specific. But I think that Democrats...
I thought it was kind of brave of them.
No, I agree with that. I do think it was brave to go out on a limb, especially when you have, all the Hollywood folks and all these celebrities already saying, don't play our music. Don't play that music in the rally. Here's a cease and desist letter. When you have all those things and you have one guy that just goes out there and says, look, I appreciated it. That's okay. I don't think that Elton John's quote or him saying that is going to sway voters.
We put Elton John and Dick Cheney there. All right.
Apples and oranges.
I never thought I'd do a segment where I got the two of them together in this segment. It's good to see both of you. Thank you very much. Another guy who was sort of a celebrity, hobnobs with celebrities, Eric Adams. Remember, he was the darling of the Democratic Party. There is now a massive corruption scandal swirling around him. Chris has that.